Hello, and welcome to this, the 19th in a series of transformative tales with me, Anna the Wolfe. And I'm so happy that you've joined me today. So happy indeed that I ask if you want to go for a run in the woods with me, because it just sounds like, wouldn't it be delightful? And so you and I decide to slip into our wolf skins and go for a run through the forest. And it's exhilarating. You're jumping over logs and I'm racing around you and kicking up all kinds of moss, and we're just going for it because it feels so good just to run. And you come flying over this rock and you're like, whoa, Anna, stop right now. I'm like, what is it? And you're like, look on the trail. And down on the trail in a shadow, kind of hunkered up, trying not to be seen, is a bird. It's a raven fledgling. And we kind of circle it a little bit and try to decide, do we need a snack or a conversation? It's hard because wolves do like to eat fledglings. And finally we decide we'd rather have the conversation. And so you kind of curl up next to the raven so it knows it's somewhat safe. And you ask, hey, little raven, why are you here in the shadows? Where is your flock? And the raven narrows its eye and kind of looks at you and says, didn't you hear the windstorm earlier? You're like, no, it's a beautiful day. I missed it. And the raven said, well, windstorms come, and for a bird like myself, you can get knocked out of your nest and end up on the ground. And then once you're on the ground, you don't quite have the flight feathers to get back up. And so that's it. It's the ground for you from here on out. So you guys think about it and you're like, well, that sounds really hard. And the raven said, yeah, it's been extremely hard. I've been down here for quite some time, and there's other prey animals other than you wolves out here. I've had to dodge bobcat. I've had to dodge great horned owl. Even a possum took a swing at me last night. It's rough. It's rough down here. I'm like, wow. You look kind of thin too. And the little raven was like, yeah, it's hard to find food when you can't fly. I should be up in my nest still having birds bring me my food. But instead I'm down here having to make a go of it. And really all I can find are the occasional slugs and grubs and those sorts of things. You're like, wow, well, I'm going to continue on down the trail, and if I find someone who can help you, I'll sure send them back. And Raven says, yeah, I've heard that a few times. You guys have a nice day. And we kind of look at each other and continue down the trail just a little bit further. We're not running as fast or as exuberantly. Our heads are hung a little low because we know maybe we have some level of responsibility or accountability towards who we find in the trail. But then we were like, nah, and keep going. And then we stop because we see a flicker come flying by he just kind of goes right between our ears and zing, right back in the direction of the little fledgling. And so we stop and listen. And Flicker zooms around the fledgling a few times. Ack, 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 ack. Ack, 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 ack. And then he sits down next to him and kind of hops up and says, hey, what are you doing down here? Didn't you know you're supposed to still be in a nest? And the fledgling's like, yeah, didn't you see that big old storm? And Flicker's like, no, I didn't see a big old storm. Are you talking about that wind last week? Like that gentle breeze? And the fledgling's like, no, it was ferocious. It really just tore my whole nest up and I fell to the ground. And I called and called and called and nobody ever came for me. So yeah, it had to have been a pretty big storm. And Flicker said, yeah, so about that. there was no big storm. And oftentimes what happens if there's a nest full of little birds, the parents will choose one that's weak and sickly and not quite right. And if they don't think that they stand a chance, instead of wasting their time on it, they just throw it out of the nest. That's probably what happened to you. So you probably deserve to be down here because, ew, look at you. And the fledgling kind of looked at itself, and sure enough, he had pen feathers on the ends of his wings, and he still had yellow at the edges of his beak, which indicated somebody should have been feeding him, but nobody was. But occasionally, there would be an animal that would come by and consult with him, but nobody ever really could solve anything for him. So he just did the best he could and started developing feathers and started developing all of the things a raven should. And the one thing he didn't develop was a flock. And so every now and again, a raven would hop down and go, "Hey, looks like you're a raven. Why don't you come on up and join us in the trees?" He's like, "I can't fly, I'm just a ground bird and I don't belong up there. I mean, Flicker said I got thrown out of the nest because I was defective." And they're like, "You listen to Flicker? Have you seen his tongue? It is so sharp. He just pokes holes in everything. Don't worry about Flicker. Come on up." And he just couldn't believe it because Flicker was really full of all kinds of wisdom also, despite his sharp tongue. And so little fledgling raven just kind of stayed on the ground until the day he heard crackling in the forest. And he smelled smoke. And he started running as fast as he could, and he ran past us wolves. And he was going so fast on his little bird legs, but the fire was faster than him. And eventually he got to the edge. He could go no further. There was too large of a canyon, and the fire was right behind him. And sure enough, he was a full-grown bird with wings. And he flew. And he soared out, and he caught a thermal and was just flying around. And although it was sad for him to see the forest behind him smoldering, he also realized he was with all the other ravens soaring around. He said, "Hey, do you guys remember that big storm? That huge one that knocked me out of my nest?" And the other birds were like, "Yeah, we remember you going down and hitting the ground like that. That was really sad. That was just really kind of a breeze, though. I think it was actually your nest that was defective. You were a fine little bird, but that nest couldn't hold itself worth anything. It just came apart." The little raven thought about it. He's like, "So it wasn't me? They didn't throw me out of the nest because I was a bad bird?" I'm like, "No, that nest was just garbage. It was never constructed of anything other than like old, nasty, funky pieces of wood that were all rotted. You're fine. Hey, did you notice we were throwing you grubs the whole time? We couldn't come down and play all the time, but we saw you down there and we were throwing those grubs to you. Don't you think it was strategic of us?" And he's like, "No, I never saw you up there." And suddenly, little raven realized he was taken care of in the world. And he just flapped his wings and continued soaring on. And I am so glad you joined me for this tale today. And I hope that you find an updraft to soar on today as well. And that there are considerations of things maybe we didn't see, and things that have carried us through circumstances beyond our control. And I hope you'll join me on the next tale, because I sure do love telling them to you, and I look forward to our time together. Thanks. Bye-bye.